Good morning. This is Jason Dean at it again, back coming at you live. It's about 10 o'clock on a Thursday morning, or 11 o'clock, I should say. This is take two of a video I just tried doing when I realized I didn't have my microphone plugged in. So here we go again. Hope everyone's doing good. It's a pretty rainy day. We had a lot of snow last night. It was an adventure driving around. I had band practice, and it was a little bit of a white knuckle situation. The roads were terrible, and I had a rehearsal in Lincolnville, so I was, the way that I go there, it's a pretty mountainous area. There's all these back roads, and you can't really avoid the hills. So it was a couple times a little bit trying to see if I could get up the hill, but my car is luckily pretty good in the snow, and so yeah, I made it. I made it back. But now it's like almost 50 degrees out, and everything's melting. It's hard to believe. Just the other night, it was like 7 degrees. It's just this weather is wacky, and it's all melty now. And hopefully, if it doesn't freeze, I hope it doesn't freeze, because if it does freeze, it's gonna be dangerous. But anyway, so hope everyone's doing good. I really appreciate the love. People have been checking out this channel more and more and supporting it. More and more people have been subscribing, and I really enjoy the and folks commenting on the videos. That I love the dialogue of the back and forth kind of thing, with interacting with people who are other fellow film fanatics. So as far as events coming up, stay tuned for this Saturday. I'm going to be doing a new interview segment. The interview segment for this channel is my favorite thing about doing Film Fanatic in general. It started out when a year ago or so I was doing started doing these Facebook Live videos, and I noticed that it was garnering more followers and attraction from people, and people checking out the page, and then I moved into where I started doing these interviews with people, and had some success. Technology is always a tough thing for me, sometimes to grasp. I'm kind of a dum dum sometimes. One example is when I forget to plug into my microphone. So I had some problems around doing some of the interviews, and some things kind of fell through. I did do a few interviews through it, and it was great, uh, but I really enjoyed it. I found myself really enjoying it, even though it was hard, mostly due to technology and my lack of skill in that department. But I want to do it more, so now I've been, doing it more for this channel, and it's grown to a thing. It's grown into a thing for me now, where it's my favorite thing to do. I love exchanging ideas and bringing on people with various backgrounds, and are all kind of connected to they're all connected to the movie industry or business, whether it's people who are actors or directors, or people who are working on, say, the scoring music for films or documentaries. Like, so I've had a pretty varied amount of guests, and so I'm trying to do more and more of those shows. So Saturday I'm going to be doing a show with a woman by the name of Kaylee, who is the owner, or I should say not the owner, but the manager for Flagship Cinema, which is kind of one of the last theaters around locally. It's a franchise, and it's a national, well, state. It's a Maine company, and they have theaters in a bunch of different locations in Maine. The closest one for us, or for me, is in Thomaston. The Colonial Theater just recently closed, which has been which was a sad thing that happened, and it's still undetermined what's going to happen with that. If it will be reopening, or some other kind of thing will take it over, so we'll see. But that place has been closed for a long time now, and the Strand is the only other theater in town, and they're more of I don't know. They've changed their thing quite a bit. It's still a movie theater, but a lot of the times it's it's a tight ship, or it's tough to catch a movie there. At least I find, if you are kind of busy or whatever because they have movies, but they're on this real limited run. So they'll have a new movie come there, and but it might only be there for a couple of days or like 3 or 4 days. So and then it's gone. They don't have a film that's playing for a consecutive amount of weeks, and where you have like many chances to see it. And they also do other things. They do concerts, comedy nights, other events that are non-film related. So it's more than just a theater. It's moved into where it's more of a variety kind of center for the arts. But it's still an amazing place. It's an amazing theater. But Flagship is really the only straight up movie theater around that only does movies. And they have, for what they are, they show movies for a few weeks when movies are put into a theatrical run or release. You have many chances to see it. They have late shows, early matinees. So that's the place I go to. So the whole show is going to be centered on for the interview is going to be how a place like that can stay open basically in this day and age because of all of the streaming platforms that are available for people to watch movies at home, and how challenging and how hard that must be to navigate, especially if you're running or helping to run a business that specializes in getting people out of their house to watch a movie. Whereas, at the end of the day, that's really the experience of how movies should be seen and are meant to be seen. So it's very complicated. It's a very complicated situation. And I believe too, Flagship was almost facing the possibility this past summer of closing for good. But there was a big outcry from the public that they didn't want to see that go away. And as far as I know, now they have made quite a bit of money and they're doing pretty well now. So, and it's really, when I go to the movies, which I don't go nowhere near as much, but I still go uh, pretty frequently, and there's times where I go quite a bit. But that's usually the theater I go to because there's some of the theaters, the actual theaters inside are actually pretty good quality theaters, and I've seen a lot of great movies there. So I try to support them and don't want to see them go away. So the whole show is going to be about that. So stay tuned for that. And then also in the world of quantum, we're going to be doing a show on Saturday, and it's going to be at the Gypsy Rose Tavern, which is on Elm Street, 115 Elm Street in Camden, which is a super cool venue that just opened. They just opened within a few weeks ago, and they're doing all kinds of things there. They're doing all kinds of music. They're running an open mic. The food there is fantastic. It's a really cool space. It's cool acoustics, and they're really pushing for live entertainment. So I'm hoping things will keep going the way they are, and it can sustain itself and keep growing, because it's something, to me it's crazy that a place you know, decided to open in the middle of winter here in Maine, and to do as much stuff as they're doing, especially now. So if the momentum keeps growing and if people come out and support it, I think it's pretty amazing to see where this place could go and where it could be, say, by the summer. So, but we're doing a show there on Saturday at 8 o'clock. It's going to be Quantum and Method for Madness with my friend Spencer Roulard, who was a guest on the show, who was totally awesome. It was a really awesome interview, probably my favorite interview I've done on this channel. And we talked all about film score or soundtracks that we really love, certain film scores for certain films, how movies are a big influence on each of us individually, in the creative realm. But he's got this amazing group called Method for Madness, which is like this modular based music, which is just amazing. And he does this modular electro dance music, and it's all original based music. Quantum also only does like original material, and it's going to be a dance party. We're billing it as a dance party, so we're going to try to play music in that kind of vein. So please come out. It's at 8 o'clock. It's a free show, and it's at Gypsy Rose Tavern, and which is a super cool venue. So please come out and support the show, and also try to support anything that's going on there because I think it's really worth it for the good of the local scene. It's an important, vital thing that we all need, and that we all need to cherish and to cultivate. We could do a lot of things alone, by ourselves, or even in the comfort of our own little home, but there's a lot of things we can't do by ourselves. So if we want to see something flourish, we have to support it. Uh, and you have the choice not to, but you can't be a person that if something goes away, you wonder why is that the case? Because I see that all the time with people who, it's interesting. I see it all the time with people who uh, well, just for example, the other night I had a conversation with some friends about the local music scene, and they were talking about how it's so hard to get gigs. It's so hard to get gigs, and it's this and that. And I don't think it's any harder. I think it's just a hard business anyway. It's a lot of hustling. You have to remove your ego from the situation where you're trying to book gigs. You need to kind of distance yourself from that and look at it as just this, thing that you want to try to do and you kind of need to do to survive musically, to play gigs. That's your soul. That's your income. That's the way you get your name around and get your name out. But you get rejection. Rejection is part of it. But you can't take it personally because, and you don't want to burn your bridges, especially in a small town. But it's not meant to be easy. It's not meant to be easy, and it's not going to be easy. You can, over time, work with clubs and establish a really good rapport with places, and you can have develop, say, a so-called in with something or a place, but you still need to kind of cultivate that, and it doesn't always mean that you're going to get an automatic series of shows. You still have to kind of, because it's a business, so it's hard. It's hard to navigate through that. Um, and it's a tricky thing. It's a very tricky thing. But I've had that conversation like just the other night about music and how places are. It's hard. It's hard to get gigs sometimes, but it just kind of comes with the territory, and it's. I don't really feel like it's any different now. I think it's kind of the same thing. It's a lot of work, and and I do enjoy it, but it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of hustling. But I don't think it's anything that I don't really think it's different. I think it's about the same. The process is the same. But these guys I was talking to, they were talking about how, well, we don't have, it always comes back to the conversation of like, well, we don't have enough people to come out to support this, or there's not enough local crowd to come out to support these venues, and this and that and blah blah blah. And at the same time, I always think automatically like, well, okay, you guys are talking about this, and you're saying this and that, and that there's not enough people to sustain it, or to kind of cultivate the scene. But are you on your own? Are you actually going out and supporting these places? Are you actually physically leaving your house and going to see these bands and going to these venues and supporting them? And most of the time that I find is that they're not. They're not. They never leave their house. The only time they leave their show, the only time they'll leave their house to support music is if it's their band. And so there's a big thing of hypocrisy. I think they need to, I think action speaks louder than words. So not only do they need to kind of voice their opinions around it, and it's an important thing, but I think they need, if they're going to be complaining about it, they need to also be going to these venues and supporting them, because you can't have one without the other. But anyway, that's my rant for today. So today I wanted to talk about this other Herschel Gordon Lewis movie that I just really, really love. I just did a show yesterday on The Wizard of Gore, which came out in 1970. Just an amazing film. My first film, my first exposure to Herschel Gordon Lewis was 2000 Maniacs. I discovered him pretty late, only fairly recently, within the last 3 years, and he's like emerged as one of my favorite exploitation directors. I think he was a true pioneer in a lot of ways. He was the first guy to show gore on film, to show practical, to have practical effects in his films, and he was doing it before anyone else, before any other American director that I know of, and he was doing it before any of the Italian directors and any of the European directors, any of the exploitation directors uh, throughout the world. He was doing it before anybody else. He was the first one to show gore and to show like copious amounts of blood on the screen, and it's just fantastic. A Wizard of Gore. My favorite film of his is Blood Feast. Wizard of Gore is right up there, and I also really love 2000 Maniacs. So many great films. He's got a huge collection of movies. One of the great things about these sets of DVDs that I've been buying, or Blu-rays, I should say Blu-rays, is they always come with a bonus movie. And overall, a lot of his films are super obscure and unknown, but they always come with films that are even lesser known. And with Wizard of Gore, it came with this other movie called How to Make a Doll. And I've only seen this film a couple of times. The other films that I've mentioned, I've seen many, many times already. But this How to Make a Doll came out in 1968. And it was directed by Herschel Gordon Lewis. It was written by him also. He used an alias, which is kind of interesting. He used a different name. It's under a different title. He did all of the sound effects and all the music. That's one thing, too, Herschel Gordon Lewis did in his career, was he created a lot of the music for his film scores and soundtracks, and also his own effects. And he created the effects for this film and the sound effects, and it's completely hilarious. And just like, I mean, you can literally picture him with like a microphone, some crappy microphone, recording it into some kind of tape recorder, and then chopping it up and putting it in a movie, and it's just like hilarious, and it's amazing. And How to Make a Doll is such a wacky, crazy movie. I mean, it's basically centered on this crazy scientist who creates this machine, or like this apparatus where you can kind of create these living dolls. Like you can create that ideal woman or man, particularly a woman, of your dreams. Your ideal woman, you know. And then when they come out, when the machine processes these women or these dolls, they are like basically like your slaves, and they're attached to you, and they're obsessed with you. And it's completely hilarious. It's definitely more of a comedy. Like all of his films are pretty goofy and silly and pretty trashy and kind of terrible and super pulpy, but they're amazing. And he's done all kinds of films. He did a lot of some teenage you know exploitation movies, sex exploitation movies, crime exploitation movies. But Herschel Gordon Lewis is mostly known as kind of the godfather of gore. He's mostly more well known for his horror films. And this film it's got a little bit of a horror element, but it's more sci-fi. But I feel like it plays out like more of a straight comedy because it's so silly and so weird. And when there's all these scenes of where they're creating these dolls in this laboratory, it's just like hilarious. One scene in particular where these two guys are trying to create, the scientist and then his friend or his partner are trying to create these living dolls. One of their attempts, they bring about this male, this guy, and he comes out and he's attracted to them, and it's like super hilarious and super funny. And he's like kind of he's wearing women's clothing, and it's it's so hilarious, and they're so awkward, and they don't know how to react to this guy, and they basically get rid of him and make him disappear, and then they try it again. And this movie is definitely a comedy, and it's super weird. It's a super weird movie. I think this movie is kind of like the epitome of like a party movie. Like this is a movie you know, that's steeped in just pure escapism. If you want to just have a good time and just forget about your day, throw this movie in because it is a just one gonzo, experience. Super funny. The music is just fantastic. The colors, I love his films because of the colors. It's got this real pulpy vibe to it. So everything is really bright and just like popping, and everything is in your face, and it just has this pulp vibe to it, and it's so raw. It's so gritty, and the most of the time the acting is terrible, but it just has all the right elements. I think that the combination of these elements that just make these films so incredibly fun and enjoyable. It's the and the dated quality, and considering that this film came out in 1968, it just blows my mind. I'm always reminded of that when I watch one of his films, and I'm like, oh wow, I can't believe this came out the year that it did. And you know and for what he did, like, he was a director who worked totally out of the system, and he actually was very successful. Like, some of his films made a ton of money, during the Grindhouse period, the drive-in period. Blood Feast and Wizard of Gore were two huge films of his, especially Blood Feast. I believe that was the most commercially successful film he ever directed. And the guy, Dave Friedman, who produced a lot of the films, who was his partner in crime for a long time, he came out of the nudie world. He kind of came out of the sex exploitation world. And there's a lot of these discs that I have, these Blu-rays, they're all put out by Arrow, which is a really cool company, and but they're packed with all these great special features. And they have like the feature movie, but then they also come with these other movies that are even more obscure. And How to Create a Living Doll is one of those even more obscure films. Wizard of Gore, like, fans of Herschel Gordon Lewis, like, that's a movie that's really regarded as one of his better movies, and it's really well known, even though it's super underground anyway. So they pack it with all these great special features and interviews, but then they put these other films on the discs that are even more obscure. So it's just awesome. It's totally worth the investment. The prices are fantastic. The transfer is amazing. And to a degree, it's like taking a college course in exploitation filmmaking, because it's really interesting for as like crazy and as silly as this stuff is. It's super interesting. And yeah, I just can't get enough of it. But there's some really great interviews with Dave Friedman and Herschel Gordon Lewis on some of these movies, on some of these packages. And there's one where they're Herschel Gordon Lewis and Dave Friedman are sitting down, and the interview is asking them, like, well, what if, like, during your time, or during this time, suddenly you guys had, a big company came and wanted to give you guys, say $10 million, what would you do with it? And their first reaction was like, well, we wouldn't dump it into one movie. We would make basically 10 million movies with that $10 million. And I just thought that's just amazing. And that sums up how those guys worked. Total guerrilla filmmakers. Even calling them filmmakers is questionable, but they were smart. They were smart businessmen. They were in the world of exploitation. I think they were passionate for what they did, and they were doing things, completely independently, outside of any known system, and they were successful. And I think that's really commendable and inspiring. I kind of feel like they were like punk rock mavericks, and they created their own scene. They created their own thing, completely, alien to anything else. And they definitely created legacy. I think on one of the interviews on The Wizard of Gore Blu-ray that I have, they were talking about how, one of the guys that they interview, who was like a horror film historian, was basically saying, like it's questionable to like how you want to regard Herschel Gordon Lewis as a figure in the world of art because it's subjective, and stuff is his stuff is pretty bad, and it rides that line of where it's like kind of almost dismissible, but yet there's something about it that is so incredibly entertaining and just fun that it merits, you know, credibility. And but and he was saying, and definitely for me as a horror fan, he was doing he was the one who basically created practical effects and gore in films. Using copious amounts of gore and blood and violence and sex in films before anyone else, before any other American director, before anyone else. Uh, but this guy in particular was saying, well, he thinks it's a thing of like, basically anybody now, whether it's a newer film or an older film, he feels like if you're a fan of horror and you're watching a movie, and that you enjoy, it's a good thing to maybe take a second to think, oh wait, who is the guy who kind of ushered this in, or who kind of started it, or who was kind of a pioneer for the genre, and that's Herschel Gordon Lewis. And he's like, well, and he was basically saying if Herschel Gordon Lewis wasn't really doing the work that he was doing, horror films could have been very different. There probably would have been somebody else doing that, but I think it would have been really different. I think, and maybe it would have been the genre as a whole. It might be something completely different without the work that he was doing. But you have to give him props and you have to give that respect because he's just great. But I highly recommend any of his films, particularly Blood Feast, 2000 Maniacs. How to Make a Doll is just great. It's not a gore fest like most of his films, but it's more of a comedy, like a sci-fi comedy, and it's super bonkers. It's super crazy, but it's just so hilarious. For me, it's a comedy. It's definitely a comedy, and it's very surreal and weird, and I highly recommend it. It's such a great film. Uh, it's like the epitome of pure escapism, and that's why we go to the movies or watch movies to take us out of the mundane, everyday thing that we experience for a couple hours. So this is Jason Dean. Thanks again for your support. Please like and subscribe to this channel if you dig what I'm doing, and keep the comments coming. I really love interacting with people, and talking with other fellow film fanatics. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.